of course, to change the structure of the party, which was a constitution of the party. But it was also that we must change the engagement, that it cannot be just engagement for elections. We must change the engagement and become some kind of liberation outfits. We must change the type of engagement. And when it didn't attract traction, in 2012, I asked my colleagues to free me, to step down from the leadership of the party so that I could have more elbow space to link up with other people to pursue what I believed could be more efficacious. By that time, as all of you may remember, we had started demonstrations based on the economic situation that was there. By the way, the economic situation of 2011, which caused the inflation of 30% overnight, was because Mr. Museveni had raided the central bank and removed close to 2 trillion shillings without the authority of parliament, a lot of which money ended up in the politics of 2011. So there was inflation of supply of money that caused the prices to hike and prompted the demonstrations that started then. So my sense was that the new fight cannot be a partisan fight. It cannot be a fight by just a party, because that's what parties are supposed to do. Parties are supposed to compete against each other. So FDC is supposed to see DP as a rival, to see NUP as a rival, to see JEMA as a rival, and to undermine each other and to compete to gain supremacy over the others. That's what happens in a democratic system. In the liberation system, the approach is different. The approach is that all of you are encumbered by the same problems that will not allow you to flourish. And therefore, you must unite and first get rid of that problem before you can create a democratic dispensation and then be able to compete. This is what up to date political parties have not come to terms with. And I have continuously sounded the warning that if we continue as we are, all political parties will indeed be captured, will be taken over by the construction that I have pointed out. And as you know, as we speak, in fact, Mr. Museveni himself was bragging way back that there will be no opposition political parties by 2021. Everybody is familiar with that assertion by Mr. Museveni. No political parties by 2021. So we must congratulate ourselves that we are still at least here talking about FDC and struggling, because we are not meant to be. So, you may want to investigate what happened to UPC, what happened to DP, and what will be happening to others. It's the same dynamics, similar dynamics. First of all, we claim to have internal democracy. We want to have internal electoral processes that can bring in leaderships of the political parties. And because We are open organizations, transparent organizations. It is easy for the hand of the state captor to come in and also become a contestant and create an internal dynamic. And even within parties, actually, the commercialization has been infused there. Even for internal party processes, you find a lot of money exchanging hands. Whenever we have had delegates conferences here, one time I wanted to raise it in our own elections of FDC. One time I wanted to raise the role or the source of money that was coming into our elections. I think that was the election of 20, no. I think that was the election of 2010, internal election of 2010. I wanted to raise this question. I was only convinced, well, not maybe convinced, but even maybe coerced by my colleague, the Honorable Augustine Ruzindana. He's the one who said, no, this will create a bad thing in the public. It will undermine our brand. Don't talk about it. So I kept quiet. But large sums of money have been coming into our party. At every election, internal, external, the large sums come. You find people, our own delegates who come from upcountry, they are accommodated in hotels, not by the party, but by candidates. Accommodated in hotels, given money, and so on. Once you take that path, you know you are on the path of death as an organization and capture. And we have been traveling along that path for some time now. And we've warned. So, FDC, just like the other parties, I believe, has failed to adopt itself to the state capture that we face. And regardless of who is leading it, if you fail to adopt, you will get the consequences that I am talking about. So, I'm sure some of you have heard that I am being accused or condemned for failure to help in raising money for the 2021 elections. Said, because I was a candidate before, I got some money for my own campaigns, but failed to get money for the campaign of Honorable Amuliat. That has been one of the issues raised. And maybe then I am now turning to my own role. The second point I said I will address, my role in the controversy. So first of all, since FDC was formed, I was its candidate in all the elections. 201 FDC was not there, so I was an independent. 206, that was shortly after FDC was formed, I was its candidate. 211, I was its candidate. 216, I was its candidate. And as I have told you, I didn't even want to become a candidate in 2016 because of what I had discovered in 2011. But that's a story for another day. So after 2016, I became firmly clear that I will not be a candidate under any circumstances in 2021. It was very, very clear to me that it would be a misuse. I would be misusing myself to be a candidate in 2021. So in 2018, I called a meeting of all my colleagues that took place in Namugongo at a place called Choto. There is a Choto Catholic, it's a Catholic institution. We held a meeting there and I informed them. I invited that meeting for the sole purpose of informing them that I would not be a candidate in 2021. That nobody, because in 2016 I had come under huge pressure by our colleagues to come in again. So to avoid that, well in advance, in 2018, I informed all our party leaders I will not be available. They had better start a process of getting somebody to contest in 2021. And of course, many of them were saying, no, you should stay. But I was completely unequivocal in the position that was taken. Regrettably, no process went underway in the party for another candidate to emerge. So when 21 was knocking, they again converged on me to say, now, really, you have to be the candidate. And I said, but are you people serious? You know all these years that I am not going to be a candidate. It's nonetheless, pressure kept on and kept on. So we literally got to the election without a candidate. The Honorable Amriat was a last minute, kind of compromise that you now just go. You are the party leader after all. That's what party leadership entails. But there was no candidate. Now, anybody who has had any slightest interaction with electoral politics will know that fundraising for an election depends on the candidate. And not in the sense that the candidate must raise all the money, no. But the fundraisers would like to know who the candidate is they are supporting. You cannot raise funds without someone whom those who are, in fact, many not only want to raise funds for a particular candidate, but they also want the candidate to know them. Because they raise funds also with the hope that when you get there, they will be remembered. So you cannot raise money when you have no candidate. You must have a candidate and sell the candidate to potential funders. And I've told you we simply had no candidate and no plan. No plan to have one, and later on how to manage and fund those elections. There was absolutely no plan. A political party, maybe I should talk for FDC. FDC is supposed to have a campaign bureau, standing campaign bureau, which is permanent, whose purpose, I don't need to overemphasize, is among others to capture what the population needs so that they are translated into a manifesto. They should have a system of capturing the views of the people to come into the manifesto through the party structures. They should be the ones to make a plan of how to get candidates at all levels, how to support them and so on. The campaign bureau must have the one that plans everything around elections. FDC has not had a campaign bureau. And so we were going to a campaign without a plan, without a candidate, without even the bureau that would be doing that. Now, you are already set for trouble. You have set yourself for trouble, you know. And so when they came to start putting pressure on me to become a candidate, I told them, no, there is no way I'm going to be a candidate. Then they said, okay, if you are not going to be a candidate, at least raise money for us. But you even then raise it for who? when there is no face of the election. So yes, it's true. They asked me to help in raising funds, but I told them, and some of those who were pressurizing me are people who, again, we had been working with closely in my own election. So even where we would raise money in my own election, they knew. But as I have said, you know, even those fundraisers need to know whom they are fundraising for. So the election was, the time was ticking, the election was coming. There were, of course, all other challenges, including the COVID challenges and so on. And there was this crisis, a crisis in which Amuriat eventually emerged as a candidate. And then, as that, in that melee of challenges, is where this whole thing that has been now, of course, liberally discussed in the public as dirty money, that's where it cropped up. And, you know, I became aware of it, discussed it with our close leaders. They were not even happy that I was discussing it, because they said, you were a party president, nobody asked you where money came from. Why are you now coming to ask? And having realized that there was this attitude, I backed off, because obviously it would, if it burst into the public like it has done, it would have been terrible for all our candidates and many other people who are not even anywhere related to the problem. So I backed off, and the election went, having gotten Amuriat as a compromise to step in and battle it out. He set up a campaign bureau that was led by Chairman Birigwa and had many other members. Shortly thereafter, I heard that the Secretary General had disbanded it, said we shall not use this campaign bureau, and Amuriat seemed incapable of resolving those challenges, because a presidential campaign is not like a parliamentary or a presidential campaign. You are campaigning in the entire country, and sometimes for a much shorter time than those who have smaller constituencies. In fact, those who have smaller constituencies, some of them have 6 months in which to campaign. But for the presidential, you have at most 2-3 months. I think the longest we have had has been close to 3 months, 90 days. But we have 100, we are now, I think, near 150 districts. So you'll be campaigning in 2 districts in one day. and you will never go back until the end of the campaign. So you need a mechanism that will keep your campaign alive all over the country and eventually take charge of the voting itself. And knowing, having been through this experience, I realized that a combination of those weaknesses, which were now administrative, and these other challenges of what I considered some kind of an infiltration, I decided also not to engage myself to run around campaigning in the country, and especially considering that it was also hazardous with the COVID thing. I am not a young man now, I am an old man, so exposing myself to all those dangers, knowing that the result is not there. I said, no, let these people fight out. So that's where the specific problems have come up. Because that problem which I backed off before the election, after the election, I wanted it now engaged with. I thought it was important that we engage with it. And we set up a team to have more discussions on it, on that suspicious hand that I was worried about. And we had several meetings in Busabala there, but which also ended without any progress, because eventually those we were tasking to give us information eventually turned on us and said, but who are you in the party, you people? Are you an organ of the party? You are asking for all this as who? And it's true, I have no role in the party. I am not in NEC, I am not in a National Council, I am not in the Delegates Conference, I am not in the working committee. So I was only asking as simply an interested party member. But they said, no, you have no locus to inquire into this. And so I now was stranded. That's why when I was given an opportunity to talk to the leaders of the party in a National Council meeting, I was invited to give a keynote speech to the National Council about some topic. And after giving my speech, I asked the chair if the chair could allow me to explain to the leaders who were assembled why I did not become active in the 2021 elections. Because that had now been turned over its head. A campaign was going on. How I am the one who led to the failure of the election. I didn't campaign for Amuriat. In fact, I am selfish. They supported me. I refused to support them. In fact, I am trying to fail the leaders from the East. I'm undermining leaders from Eastern Uganda. So a tribal element crept in, and I could see it was heading in a dangerous direction. So I thought it was incumbent on me now to give some information to the members of the National Council. And that's what I did in the National Council, the last National Council of FDC. I told them pretty much what I have told you. And from there, quite evidently, some kind of a war broke out But the National Council, having heard, because Nandala, of course, replied to what I said in the National Council, and I was not accusing Nandala as a person. This whole thing has now been branded like it's a Besigye Nandala duel. There was nothing like that. It was the party leadership as a whole that I was engaging over what had happened in the party. It was not specific to Nandala, but Nandala chose to reply at that National Council meeting, and the National Council decided, in its wisdom, that there should be set up a committee of elders to now investigate this matter thoroughly, try to reconcile all of us who were having issues in those matters, so that the party can once again move smoothly. It took some time for that committee to be appointed, and before the committee could be appointed, the mobilization against me was in progress, intensifying. But I was not very bothered. Eventually, the committee was appointed by the party president. He asked me whether the people he had appointed, I am fine with them. I said, I have no problem with anybody, provided they get what will help the party. And I appeared before the committee. But while the committee was sitting, the committee they themselves appointed was sitting, they set up on a campaign across the country. They called leaders of all the districts of Busoga and started discussing what the committee they set up was supposed to handle. They started showing how Besigye is the problem, how he has received money, he never accounts, how he has, I don't know, done what, how he's a tribalist, he doesn't want people from the east, and so on and so forth. From Busoga, they went to Mbale and held a meeting with all the districts of the other east. Then they went to Lango and held a meeting with the districts of Lango, went to Acholi, In the meantime, their committees here seated. In fact, in one of the meetings that was in Busoga, the chair of the committee was also invited there. And that has eventually created a problem even within the committee. So, I think all that is possibly what culminated in some of our members deciding to talk amongst themselves about how to save the party. The ones who were convened by Honorable Semuju. I think now, and they are working on their own. I am not involved with them. But I think they considered that where things had reached, they should invite leaders of the party and see how to rescue the party. The other contradiction that is there is, of course, about the election. Because the FDC elects its leaders every 5 years. The last election was supposed to be in 2020. That's when the term of all our leaders expired, 2020. But when it expired, the party thought that it was inopportune to hold elections then because of the COVID pandemic. And so they invited the National Council to extend the life of the leaders in office by another 3 years. which 3 years are expiring this year. So there is supposed to be an internal election renewing the entire leadership of the party this year. That has become another point of contention. And I am not really familiar with all the details there. Maybe you should interrogate them and the other members of the party. But I know that there has been controversy over the management of that election. With the Electoral Commission especially, just like happens in all areas where capture happens, the Electoral Commission seems to be accused by some members or leaders of the party that the Electoral Commission is captured and acting in a manner that cannot lead to an acceptable outcome. There have also been some other contradictions, I think, relating to the impending elections. So there is a controversy. Some people say NEC sat and took a decision to stay elections and first do certain critical things, stay while doing certain critical things. Neither was the election stayed, nor were those things undertaken. So there are issues to do with the electoral process. And in the meantime, the National Council, which set up that Elders Committee, is supposed to now sit on the 28th of this month. It's been reconvened to sit on the 28th of this month. But in the meantime, the elections, while that controversy has not been resolved, which the National Executive, I think, was advising that they should first resolve these controversies so that they go into the election in a harmonious way. The other members or leaders of the party are saying, no, we don't care about all that. We shall go on with the elections, whether you like it or not, and whether there is National Council, whether NEC says what, we shall go on. So there is now clearly, I think, confusion in the organs of the party. That is what I can see in terms of specifics and my role in them. Where do we go from here? Or where does FDC go from here? I think without the leaders stepping back and taking a breath to calm down, the crisis will definitely escalate. And I can't predict where the party will end, but quite likely where others have ended. That's a likely trajectory. Because you see, what happens is, once people who are in the party now start acting against others, and others seek to resist them and so on, quite often those who are in power tend to revert to the state to protect them against their members. And I think that is a likely trajectory. If leaders don't step back and reflect on whether that's where they want FDC to go, I think it's important that leaders stop back, because there is now like an outright war. It's still a war of words, but it can degenerate even into a physical confrontation, that, like we have seen indeed outside headquarters of other parties. In fact, I hear that now to enter FDC headquarters, you need to be screened. In some ways, there are kanyamas there and things like that. So that escalation is likely to continue if leaders don't step back, take a breath, and reconsider what all this means. and especially to try and resolve the contradictions which are there, which are real. But more especially, since this is also, and this is why this is very dangerous, because it is happening in an election year, internal election year. So, even before the election starts, you are at war. There is no way the managers of the elections are suspected to be uneven-handed. And that spells disaster. So I think it is important that all these grandstanding elections must continue, whatever should be avoided. I think time should be created by the party leaders to resolve these contradictions, to have a credible process, a process in which they are, all members are confident. These other issues can even play themselves out in the elections, and maybe there will be no way of stopping that. But that's sometimes what elections resolve. They resolve contradictions, provided the outcome will be respected by all. Because if they are not, then you are heading for a rupture. That is the unfortunate trajectory you may end up with. So I hope that there will be sense prevailing to halt the electoral processes, at least until the next National Council, where the controversies that had been discussed by them and they appointed a committee can then engage with that and engage with the other issues that are causing controversies, and hopefully get a solution out of it. But to wind up, let's interrogate, and for the political parties, I would like to interrogate why Museveni would want to fund his opponents. Because one can see it as a contradiction in terms. Why should I give you money when you are going to compete against me? You see, Museveni knows that there is no power in parliament. He doesn't care whether you are in fact, he wants us to be in parliament to legitimize government. Say, but you also win elections. You are also there. Why do you complain when you are defeated? You are also there. So he doesn't he actually wants us to be in parliament, provided we don't seek to remove him, provided we are good opposition. If we are good opposition, he has no problem with us being in parliament. He will give us money so that we are there, so that we are also in the local areas. There is some legitimization it creates, that there is opposition in Uganda, there is, and without that money, actually, opposition indeed, even as some kind of flowers, may cease, because you may even fail to get people to be nominated. So he wants to fund an impotent opposition. Secondly, he does not want these opposition groups to link up. The linking up of opposition groups is something that he does not want to see. Whichever, the opposition groups must fight each other, actually, must be at war with each other. And he is behind the creation of feuds between opposition groups. And part of that money is intended to sustain the separation of political parties that are in captivity. They should not link up. Now, if we don't do that, we will never get out of captivity. So that's why, for me, even now, yes, I'm affected by what is going on in FDC because it has been a strong party with a strong mission of liberation. So if it is weakened, certainly we suffer. But at the end of the day, what will liberate Uganda is to have a linkage of all those who are in captivity, regardless of their parties. We must get together and not focus on his election, but focus on a resistance struggle to remove him. So he's opposed to both. He is opposed to any resistance struggle outside the elections. He wants just, if you are talking about elections, you are his friend. Why? Because election is the killing ground. The election is a prepared killing ground, which will never remove him. He knows resistance, activism, defiance has removed dictators, many, including here in Africa. So Museveni fears two things: fighting him outside the elections, whether with guns or without guns. That's his focus. So he pays money to the politicals not to engage in fighting him outside the elections and in not getting together to build a strong popular force that will achieve that.